when I graduated from college and RUS, I say RUS. It was REA back in those days, and that's the fond memories I have of that organization. But they've changed their name since to the Rural Utility Service. But anyway, they were hiring, and Kansas seemed to be a great hunting ground for bringing in new recruits to the USDA. So they were hitting the colleges here in Kansas, and I hired on with them. But you know, after serving time in the military then and some time back east in Washington, D.C., then the ultimate job at RUS is a field job, because then you can represent your agency and the organization in a particular state, and you are the contact with all of the borrowers in that state. I did not have Kansas. I had Louisiana for a while, and then I moved up to Oklahoma for about 6 years there. But then, you know, I started, you know, getting calls from Washington, it's very difficult for them to get people to come back into D.C. once they've been in the field. Because that's a great life. You're a field man, your boss is 2,200 miles away, and you're representing the organization to the state. So they had trouble getting field people to come back in and take these higher positions in management. And so at a weak moment, they talked me into coming back to Washington, D.C., and that was in 1980. And so I really enjoyed what I was doing in Oklahoma. But, you know, I thought, well, if I can help out, you know, and get into higher management, who knows what that would lead to. And so I went back and took over as a branch chief of the operations and management area for the western part of the United States, which was everything west of the Mississippi at that time, which included Guam, the Micronesian Islands, Saipan, Rota, and Tinian, and Hawaii. So it was a pretty good territory, particularly since we had to go out and check on borrowers every now and then in Hawaii and Guam and the Micronesian Islands. And so it was a great territory, but that's when Kansas then came under my perusal. It was one of the states then that I was managing the field people and the loan staff back in Washington. So that's when I became familiar with Kansas, because I hadn't lived here since we moved and took the job. Well, after about 6 years in Washington, fighting the traffic to get to work every day, as 250,000 cars all heading the same direction, trying to get to the same place. And at minimum, it was an hour, and sometimes an hour and a half if there was any moisture. And then trying to run the kids back and forth to school. They were both in high school, and they were being, you know, they had to go to a school 20 miles away, and so it just, you know, and Peggy was working because it took both salaries to survive back there. So, you know, about 6 years of that, and we were just running ragged, and it was just time to start looking to do something else. And and even though I enjoyed my job and had very fond memories of RUS. Along those lines then, I was very familiar with a lot of the field staff, particularly in my territory. I supervised them for quite a number of years. Gerald Smith was the field man in Kansas, and he called me and he said, I know you're looking to get out of Washington. He said, there's a position opening up in rural telephone in western Kansas. And so I visited with him about that for a while, and I asked him who might be applying for it, and he told me there were several managers around the area that might be wanting to move to a different company. And thinking that I probably wouldn't, you know, might not have a chance against other established managers, I was concerned about whether or not to apply, but he talked me into it, and he said, I really think you're the type person that they need at this point in time in their organization. So I went ahead and put my application in, found a very receptive board, used my Kansas roots as a good step into the interview process, and one thing led to another, and here I am. Okay. Well, maybe not immediately, you know, when I first took the job, but But it became pretty apparent not too long into the position that plain old telephone service was not going to be the way of the future. There were a lot of things on the horizon then. Were they really not too long after that? Because I came here in '86. Then the internet, was being talked about in the industry, and of course some of the companies were into video at that point already. They owned cable television companies. So I knew that plain old telephone service, and particularly in this area out here, through the history of our of rural telephone, the main way that Western Kansas had grown, that rural telephone had grown, was through acquisitions. So there wasn't a lot of growth at that point in time. In fact, everything had pretty well leveled off because all of the small rural mom and pop companies had already been absorbed and acquired by rural telephone in this area. So there really wasn't a lot of room that I could see for growth except other acquisitions. And so that was kind of on the forefront of my mind at that time, was looking around to see if there were other possibilities. At the same time, then we were, being asked by several communities, Hill City and Bogue being two of the prime communities at that time that were asking us to come in and serve their area, because we were in the process of upgrading everything to one-party service, and they were still on multi-party service over old lead cable, and they really couldn't make phone calls or private phone calls without a lot of crosstalk during any kind of moisture. So they were really asking us to come in and do something, but it was just something that had never been done at that point in time, short of an acquisition. It did, but the first use that we made of fiber was tying our central offices together and using it for toll facilities and trying to get all of our central offices. There were 26 at that time, trying to get them all tied together. But at the same time, we were looking at and developed a plan to, in the event that we ever wanted to look at going into some other AT&T, which was Southwestern Bell at that time, if we ever wanted to go into looking into their territories and maybe trying to build, then we would need a way in and out, and which could get rather expensive. But we devised a plan because at that time they couldn't stop us from tying our exchanges together. We could go through their territory as long as we didn't stop and provide service. So we hit several of the key communities in western Kansas as we were tying by sending our fiber optic cable through that community. And for example, from here to Kensington and Long Island and some of those exchanges up there, we took the fiber through Norton and Almena. And then as we took fiber east, we went through Phillipsburg and Smith Center, and then back south to Victoria, down through Plainville and Stockton. And so we had fiber at that point in time then through a lot of the Southwestern Bell / AT&T communities in the event that the opportunity ever arose for us to offer service in those areas. It did, and I don't know if we had anything to do with helping to speed this process up, but that's where Hill City and Bogue came in. Their service was really, really poor, and it was the old United system. It wasn't Sprint at that time, but they had the commission out several times. There were people in that community, that just really wanted to take on the service provider. And while we couldn't do anything because they were willing to give us a franchise for the community, because the franchise expired with United and they weren't going to renew it. So they said they would give rural telephone the franchise, but we still needed a certificate from the Kansas Corporation Commission because deregulation wasn't in at that time. And this was like 1995. And I think deregulation then in '96 was when it first came in. Well, somewhere during all of the confusion, and Ken Clark and some of the other people in the community kept going back to Topeka to lobby the KCC, and they had hearings. at the legislature, and so somewhere during this confusion and process, the Kansas Corporation Commission issued us a certificate, but did not remove the certificate from Sprint. So we both had a certificate. Well, with a certificate in hand and the only franchise in the community, we decided to go ahead and build Hill City and Bogue, and using fiber to the home at that time, because that was relatively new. And so we did start our build, and I won't go into all the details of what happened along the way with Sprint then trying to sell the facilities to Classic Cable, which ended up in another lawsuit, but it didn't stop us from continuing our build. And so a year later, we had both communities pretty well built with fiber, and had a tremendous success in signing up people. In fact, when we opened up in Hill City to start sign-ups, we had 10 to 12 customer service reps in the area to sign people up, and there was long lines out the door during those periods of time. And so it ended up resulting in then Sprint. It allowed us to open the door to go to Sprint then, because they had 2 or 3 other exchanges in western Kansas, Waukegan and Quinter being 2 of those, and it allowed us to go in and with the door open then to go ahead and acquire these other exchanges out here, which we did. And so that happened about a year after we had overbuilt. But that was the first in the nation. Then in 1996, they changed the federal law to where it was legal then and possible to go in and start building in these other communities. And so that just one thing led to another, and Norton and Almena were the next 2 on our list that were prime candidates, because a lot of the people in those areas had asked for us to come up and serve their area as well. They could not get fiber. They were told they would never get fiber because they were too small. And so it just created another great opportunity, and one thing led to another, and we've been successful in several of the AT&T communities. It was a relatively small company in '86 when I came, and when did you come, Steve? 90. Okay, so it was still pretty small then. 32 people. Right, we had 26 when I came, and so one of the things that I'm probably most proud of is the fact that we have grown the company and created a lot of jobs. You can't create these jobs without growth. And so that was in the back of our mind, is if we can do things in western Kansas, if we can create a job, then let's keep that opportunity in our company and in western Kansas, instead of paying someone from out of state or somewhere else to do that. So we had that in the back of our mind as well, and then as we started expanding, we needed more people, we needed more employees, we needed service in these areas, and so that was just an opportunity that we wanted to take advantage of, and I'll just give you an example of some other things that that come to mind when we're growing the company. And one is that we were having our directory done by a company in Illinois, I believe, and so it's like, okay, can we bring that in-house and create another 5, 6, 10 jobs, whatever? And can we provide video? Can we, acquire some of these small cable companies out and start a video part of our business and create opportunity for growth and new employees? And with the success of overbuilding these communities and acquiring these, we needed more people. So, just along the way, all of these things, that we've tried to bring in and help grow the organization has helped grow the number of employees that we've needed to. And I think we reached a high of somewhere around 380 at one point. I think we're about 318 or 320 now. But it is it's meant a lot to me and the board to be able to do that and create jobs. It is a little bit of a challenge, but the board of directors has always wanted to maintain that family atmosphere. So that was relatively easy from that standpoint, is because they made it easy they wanted to keep this company, the small town environment, Customer service has always been their number one priority, so whatever we could do for the customer, that made it easy. It's like, you know, it didn't matter if it cost a few bucks more here or there if we could keep the customers happy. And of course they were our members as well at that time. So that part of it was easy, but trying to manage out with all of these diversities and variety of things that we were getting into, one thing I've really been kind of pride myself on, Steve, is, you know, I'm not the smartest guy in the world. I just come from a small town in southern Kansas, and just a boy off the farm. But I do pride myself in putting together good teams. I can read people pretty well, and so I think that one of the things that we've done is put together a tremendous management team, whether it be the executive management team or the next level. We've put together a lot of really good people, and that helps manage this process, because then you have to give them some direction and step out of the way and let them do their job. And you know, I think in the beginning I had my fingers in a lot of things, but over time then you just start backing away from those things and letting your people do the job that they were hired for. Well, there was an opportunity that came along in the 90s. And at some point we knew, you know, I'd mentioned to you that we weren't able to grow western Kansas, and our subscriber base wasn't growing except through acquisition. And so there became a point in time when we felt like, you know, wireless is the next big thing. And we really needed to be a player in the wireless business as well, because even though it would turn out to be, and we knew it would be a competitor to our landline business, we really felt like most people wanted both. They would like the security of the landline at the home or business, and at the same, and not only security, but probably a little better serviced as well. They wanted that, but we felt like when they're traveling, they probably want to go mobile. And an opportunity came along, working with the other companies in the state of Kansas, 27 of them at the time, that the government was actually giving out licenses in the states, had split the states up into these little rural service areas, which was good for us, because it wasn't just one big metropolitan area that you were bidding on. And anyone that had a presence in each of these 27 rural serving areas could throw their, it was kind of like throwing your ping pong ball into a lottery, because you had an opportunity to have your name in that lottery. And in most of the areas there was at least one independent telephone company, and along with Continental and Sprint and AT&T. And so, you know, in most of the areas we had about 1 in 4 chance of winning the lottery. So we formed a loose-knit organization, because you couldn't have anything in writing at that time, and decided that we were all going to enter the lottery, and if we won, we would put together an organization and start putting together a wireless company. Well, we ran like 100 models, and out of 100 models, it showed that we would probably be successful in about 50–60% of the, maybe 70% of the state, with the number of balls that we had in the queue. And so, as it turns out, the model was right. We won that many of the RSAs in the state. What the model didn't show was that we would win all of the interstate systems, and the ones that we lost were in some of the remote areas that we had an interest in, but they weren't critical to the interstate system. I think south of Wichita was one area that we didn't win. That was the only area. We had the Turnpike, we had Interstate 70, Interstate 35, and so when we put together this organization, then 2 or 3 independent companies that didn't join our organization won the area south of Wichita, so we acquired that area from them. A lot of the other remote rural areas, AT&T and Sprint really weren't interested in, so we did a little trading. We traded Sprint an area between Lawrence and Kansas City for all of their rural areas, and it turned out very successful then, as we started building a wireless company, and again created jobs for probably about 150 employees at that time. What transpired then, as the company grew statewide, we had about a 4.5%, almost a 5% ownership in it. And we were also an agent. And so a lot of our revenue came, as an agent for the organization, because there wasn't a lot of dividends at that time being paid. Most of the money was being put back into providing service. They were stretching the limits of, to make the money last, they were stretching the limits of where the towers were located. So there were a lot of areas in our territory and others throughout the state that they worked okay for these 3-watt bag phones and things, but when they started developing the smaller phones, 0.6 of a watt, there was a lot of disruption between towers, and it was really causing some issues. And of course, the people out in western Kansas, they really saw this as our service, our company, because we were the agent for the Kansas Cellular Group. So there was, we just about peaked out as well after about operating at 5 or 6 years, and there were other competitors coming on the scene then, because we just didn't have any competitors at that point in time. There were other competitors coming on the scene, and the group decided that, it might be that this would be the optimum time to try to sell the organization and then find other ways to get into the wireless business if any of us desired to do so. And so we did vote to do that, and Alltel bought the Kansas Cellular Group, and we made quite a bit of money off that sale. But fortunately, and the board was willing to do this, we set the money aside and thought it'd be good to use that money to start our own wireless business out here in western Kansas. But it was a little bit more of a challenge for just one company to do that, and we needed a little larger footprint as well, and we needed more cash. And so Golden Belt Telephone to the south of us was a great partner, and they were looking to do the same thing, and so we put our heads together and our money together and formed Nex-Tech Wireless in 2005, and launched about, I guess it was 2004, launched about 2005. So anyway, that's been a success story in itself, because the first thing we set about doing was, building more towers in western Kansas, because to eliminate the poor service that folks were seeing out here, and that really paid dividends. Because as we filled in these areas, we knew where all the gaps were. So as we filled in these areas, the service was extremely good at that time, and much better than what Alltel was operating at then. And they were operating out of Little Rock, Arkansas, with some agents out in this area. And so we were really successful in getting the thing launched and having good success right off the start. We knew we couldn't just be an island on ourselves out here. We needed to have roaming partners. And so we began negotiating, and I started meeting with some people in the Sprint organization in Kansas City to see if we could negotiate a national roaming arrangement with them. And it took about a year, but we were successful in getting and they'd never done anything like this before, but they wanted to, because they had areas of the country that they couldn't serve. And rather than building towers, for example, from Salina to Denver, they had practically nothing out here. They came I think they came out to Russell, but the service was extremely poor even in Russell. And they had nothing then from on into Denver. So it was a natural then for them to do this with us and with other companies like ours throughout the United States. So that's when we started this strategic roaming alliance with Sprint, to where when our subscribers left our area, they would be on the Sprint, and it would look like they were still in their home area through this arrangement. And we had a preferred roaming arrangement as far as paying each other roaming fees as well. It was during this process that I met Bennett Gamble with Sprint, and as I was meeting with him about Nex-Tech Wireless, we were having lunch, and I mentioned to him that Sprint still had several ILEC exchanges in western Kansas that it looked like they had no budget because they were doing nothing with the area, and there were still very limited broadband in the area. And so we began negotiating with that, and prior to those negotiations opening up, we had just overbuilt a cable community that we had, Osborne. And using our cable facilities and building fiber in that community, we overbuilt a Sprint community in Osborne. So that was fresh on Sprint's mind. And though the negotiating power was on our side, as we suggested maybe Russell was next and then Downs might be next. And so they did come to agreement with us and decided it would be best if they sold these 10 exchanges in western Kansas to rural telephone, and that we could probably do better at getting broadband service out, which we did. That was the next big thing then after the acquisition. I think in 2005, we then started building fiber to the home in all of these communities, and finished sometime in 2006, I believe, and all of a sudden, about another 5,400 consumers had broadband service in western Kansas. They called it the Stimulus Act, or the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. It was a brainstorm of the president, thinking that if the government could start, a lot of projects around America by, using federal monies to not just as grants, but grants and loan combination, that it would help the economy and help get us to where we needed to be. And in the communications side of it, they wanted to get more broadband out to rural America. So that's when that came about. Again, that was about 2000. I guess that was 2008 or 9 in there sometime, because we actually started construction in 2010. But anyway, it opened up an opportunity when we knew when they listed the agencies that would be managing the funding for the rural areas. RUS was one of those. And so we were very familiar with RUS, and we felt, if we could just get our project through RUS, that it would give us an opportunity to serve a lot of the areas that we could not afford to serve. When we were doing a lot of these overbuilds, we could only afford to, because of the expense, we could only afford to build inside the city limits. So there were all these areas and a lot of people, and ranchers and farmers and small businesses outside of the city limits of a lot of these AT&T communities that we just couldn't reach. And even some in our own areas, that exchanges that we just hadn't gotten to yet, that with fiber that deserved better communication as well. And we thought the only way we can do that is if we can get some of it through grant monies with this stimulus program. And so we put together a package, and it was a lot of work. We had a lot of people in the organization put a lot of hours and time in it, and I've got some pictures of the stack of documents on the desk that were this high. And you're thinking of a simple application when you've got documents that high on the desk. But it turned out that we needed $101 million to do what we wanted to do. And that seemed kind of a daunting task, and I'm really pleased and proud of the board, because that would normally be something that would most boards would just, we've been used to dealing in $5-10 million loans, and here we're looking at $101 million, at least half of it, $51 million in loan that they'd have to take on. But they hung with us and decided it was a good opportunity to get broadband as widely as we could in western Kansas. And so we did make the application. We were concerned that it might be too large, but I guess on the other side of the coin, RUS at the same time were getting pressure to get some of these out. And when they were looking at all of their applications, they were very familiar with us, felt very confident that we would be one of the companies that could make it work and obviously pay the government back, because that's one of their main concerns is we're good lenders, but we're also good collectors. We want to be paid back when we make these loans. And so we were one of the first to be awarded the stimulus money. I think the administrator made an announcement at a meeting on the West Coast, and there were 3 or 4 names announced, and we were one of those. And what the president had indicated in his stimulus program was that he wanted shovel ready. He wanted companies that would be shovel ready, and he wanted this project underway, and he wanted to see results right away. Well, we were the only company, I think, that was shovel ready, because within a few months, and we didn't have loan documents. I mean, the government wasn't ready. We were ready, but they weren't. But we wanted, on the faith of the fact of who we were dealing with, the RUS program, we started the project without having all of the documents completed, and they kept promising us that we would have the documents. But it's really strange that they were wanting, 3 or 4 months into the project, they were already wanting to know how many subscribers we've connected, and it's like, well, it doesn't happen quite that quickly, We had 3 years to do this project, which was quite an undertaking as well, because it's like a $101 million project over 4,600 square miles or whatever it was that we were working in. That's quite a feat. And so we did hire 3 engineering firms and split the projects up and did finish the job on time and under budget. And it was quite an accomplishment, and I just give credit to all of the people that worked on it in our organization, because that was quite a job to undertake. And, while we were submitting our application, we had also had probably several hundred letters of support of people and businesses that said, hey, hospitals, libraries, administrative people in the communities, and medical clinics, all wanting better speed of broadband, or broadband period. And so that was quite impressive, I guess, in our application, when they'd received such tremendous support for our project. You're right. There's so many things that you kind of tend to gloss over some of them, but that was one of the other first projects that we did with the fiber. Was when we were tying our central offices together. We were also tying schools together in our area, and it gave them a tremendous opportunity then to start sharing resources. And we did get some RUS grant monies to help them with some of the facilities in their schools, to set up a classroom in each of the schools, and to buy equipment, because a lot of the schools couldn't afford to do that at the time. And so they set up a consortium, and we helped them make application, and so they were successful in then later even getting a second classroom set up through some grant funding. And so it was, again, it was one of the first in the nation. I think there were 2 in Kansas at the time, and we were one of the 2, and I know the legislators were interested, so we did a show and tell at the state legislators, where Pioneer and us tied our schools and our central offices together to show how this video works from one school to another. One of the other things that we were successful in doing with the libraries in our areas, we knew that not everybody could afford a computer, and that not all the libraries could maybe afford to get everyone set up and get broadband in. So we've offered free broadband service in each of the libraries in our area, so that they can either have a computer in-house, or if someone didn't have internet, they could bring their computer in and get on the broadband, the internet system in each of the local libraries. Well, I'll just kick off first with following that economic development line of thinking. We're probably one of the first in the nation then to hire an economic development person on staff, because generally most independent telephone companies just don't do that. I mean, they rely on the state organizations or someone else, but they can't be nearly as passionate about their area as someone living and working in your company and in western Kansas. And so we did bring an economic development specialist on staff, and still have that position today. And it's worked out extremely well for us, because with the expertise that those individuals bring, they know how to find grant monies out there that are available for the different communities and different organizations. And have been very successful in helping others and other communities, and even internally has been very helpful in finding grant monies that we could use to, like building an assisted living center where the money come back into a revolving loan fund that we can use out to help other businesses, small businesses expand, and so that's been very successful. So that's an area where we've just taken one extra step to try to grow Western Kansas and to bring other jobs to Western Kansas other than just what we could grow internally. And I feel like we've probably grown thousands of jobs in Western Kansas outside of our organization. So that was just to finish off on the economic development aspect of it. But as far as recapping, I think probably the biggest thing that our organization has done as far as what I feel good about is all of the jobs that we've created. I mean, when I look back at a picture that was taken of the organization when I came here, there's only one person in that picture that was here when I came here, and that's Brian Mater. All of the others, everyone in the organization has been hired since I've been here, and I feel really good about that, because that's what we set out to do, is to create jobs and create employment. Probably really close behind that second would be the economic development opportunities that we've given all of the businesses and everyone in Western Kansas. When you provide fiber to the home and the high-speed internet that we provided, and the broadband through video and high-speed internet, and offer these packages along with the wireless, there's not many places in the country, even in the cities, that have the kind of package that we can put together. I've had my friends back in Washington, D.C. that live in Northern Virginia that have told me that they're envious because they just cannot get the kind of service that we have out here. And when you have people in the larger cities that are telling you they're envious, they should also be envious of the kind of living that we have out here as well. It's a to me, in my opinion, a little higher quality of lifestyle. You don't have as many. You don't have like 1 million friends like they might have back there, but you also have other difficulties that go along with it. We have a great lifestyle, and when you can combine that with all of the latest technology that we've done, it's just a perfect recipe.